If you notice something different about the Green Bay Packers in preseason week 1, you weren't alone. Matt LaFleur noticed it too, and he's excited about it. Why you should be too on today's episode.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Matt LaFleur talked about a style of play difference, a mindset difference yesterday in relationship to what we saw on the field on Friday. Take a listen.
The one thing that showed up on tape, which you're never quite sure until you get into those games, is that I thought there was a different play style than we've seen maybe here in the past. I really thought these guys were attacking it the right way, really in every phase, which we're really pleased with. But again, it was one game, and we got to continue. That's just should be the first step in the journey, and it needs to keep improving. So we'll have a great test this week against a team that I think is as respected as anybody in terms of how they coach their guys and what they've been able to accomplish over the years. And so it'll be another good test for us.
Think about what we saw offensively from the Packers. It was a running game that dominated, created chunk plays. Yes, they gave up some pressures. They had some turnovers, even with the twos. But you're talking about backups on defense. Carrington Valentine is no better than cornerback 4 on this team. He's out there playing press, man, coverage, and absolutely physically dominating on the outside against NFL players as a rookie. Luke Musgrave and Dontavian Wicks bodying guys, rookies, coming in and buying into what Matt LaFleur is selling. Be physical. Be aggressive. Dictate terms. This has been my biggest criticism of this defense, what seems like from time immemorial. Like you have to go back to Fritz Schirmer practically for me to be saying, I love the approach of this defense for the Green Bay Packers. And think about the biggest criticisms of the Aaron Rodgers teams, especially with their failings in the postseason. It was always that in the big moments, when big boy football was to be played, they were not up to the task. We're not allowed to say this word. We have to whisper. They were soft. That is what the criticism was. I don't think it was always fair, by the way, but that criticism was out there. When you get bullied in the run game, when you can lose a playoff game, not just lose, get your asses kicked in the playoffs with an opposing quarterback throwing 10 passes, you probably played soft. Now, the Packers did not play soft against the 49ers when they lost at home. That was more an issue of the offense not being able to play some big boy football against the San Francisco 49ers. And how much of that is the style of play that they were trying to live in with Aaron Rodgers? I'm not blaming Aaron Rodgers because obviously they were really successful for a really long time. And early in his career, especially, the Packers lost playoff games, not because of Aaron Rodgers, but because the defense could not stop anyone. But that's part of this too, is that defensively, it seems like they want to change the style of play. Every day, remember, we talked about this the other day when Russell Douglas talked on the record about we wanted to play more press. Joe Barry, we had a conversation with him. He brought it to Matt LaFleur. LaFleur said, let's go. And we're seeing it already. Press man in preseason. And someone like Carrington Valentine is going, let's go. If this is the team that they're going to be, Russell Douglas is going to eat this season. Eric Stokes absolutely has a place on this team if they're going to play press man coverage. And Jair Alexander is Jair Alexander. He can play whatever. Now he's got a soft tissue injury right now. Packers are saying totally preliminary, precautionary. Didn't practice yesterday. Nothing to be concerned about. Just something I want to flag in case you weren't deep on the Twitters yesterday and you missed it. But that's a mindset. It's not just a game plan. Like, a game plan reflects mindset. What is your mindset? What is your approach? What is your attitude toward playing football? And the Packers right now, it seems like their attitude toward playing football is playing football with attitude. You've got receivers digging out, defensive backs going to dig out safeties, tight ends getting up to the second level and sealing linebackers. On that long Emmanuel Wilson run, you had Shane Ryan execute about as good a combo block as you will see. Linebacker fills in and he buries his guy. Buries him. And that's with guys who are, Zach Tom is not known for being a dominating run blocker. Yosh Nijman seen as more of a pass protector. Elton Jenkins, really good football player. I don't think he's known for being a bruiser. Now, you go and start fights with the Cincinnati Bengals, and maybe you start to change that reputation. And I'm not saying he doesn't. By the way, Elton Jenkins is an awesome run blocker. He is a tough MFer. So I'm not trying to slander anybody on this. I'm just saying that's not what he's known for. Like, he's not Quentin Nelson, where there's clips of him just like laying dudes out. Not saying you have to do that to be a good player. My point is, it's just not what this team has been known for. That physicality. When you play the 49ers, you have to match their physicality. When you play the Philadelphia Eagles, you're going to have to match their physicality, their power, their strength, and their speed. And I know the Kansas City Chiefs have this reputation, but they found out that the best way to beat these two high safety looks, in addition to having, a singularly talented quarterback and a singularly talented tight end who can just wreck the middle of the field, is they can run gap and power run schemes and be successful. You bring in Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey, you remake your offensive line, previously with Orlando Brown, and you can just bully people up front. But if you're the Packers, not all of those guys up front are mauler types. We're going to talk about the offensive line coming up in a second. But when you have a tight end in Luke Musgrave, not known for his blocking, that's not what he is. Getting key blocks in power run situations. Tucker Kraft coming in, and we're going to talk about the tight end situation at the end of the show. He got a couple key blocks in the run game. These are rookies. This is supposed to take them longer. But guess what? They came in right away with the mindset that we are going to play with force. Something is different. Every year you have to come in. Bill Belichick is famous for this idea that every year is different and you have to come in and prove it again. Matt LaFleur has clearly come in and said, this year is going to be different. We are going to look different. And if you want to be a part of it, you better buy in. Get in, we're going shopping. Either you're going to get in the car and you're going to play the type of football that we want you to play, or you're going to be left. You can take the bus. And does it mean that they're going to go to the playoffs and win the Super Bowl and all that stuff? No, of course it doesn't. But it is not a coincidence. It can't be a coincidence because it's happening on offense and defense. That means right now, for Matt LaFleur and this Packers team, message received. All right, we're going to talk about this offensive line situation right now because there's a ton of tentacles right now in all of this. We're going to do that in just a second right here on Locked On Packers. August is here, and you know what that means. It's really hot. That's one of those things. But it's also the official start of fantasy football drafting month. Get championship ready for your home league by trying out Best Ball on Underdog Fantasy. It's so easy. All you do is one live snake draft. No waivers, no trades. Underdog sets your best lineup every week. Try it out with Underdog's Best Ball Mania Tournament. The largest fantasy football contest of all time is back, and even bigger, $15 million. I always feel like I have to do the Dr. Evil Pinky of total prizes up for grabs, including an absurd $3 million going to the winner. Last year, guess what? The winner drafted their team in July. So don't wait around. We're mid-August already. Visit underdog.com, underdogfantasy.com, or find them in the App Store and sign up with the promo code LOCKEDON to get that first deposit of yours doubled up to $100. That's Underdog Fantasy with the promo code LOCKEDON. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Everydayers. Joint practices with the New England Patriots this week. Taylor Kyles from CLNS Media covers the New England Patriots, going to be at joint practices. He is going to come and do much like James Rapien did for the Cincinnati Bengals, give us an inside look at the Patriots ahead of that game. It's like a quasi crossover. And then he'll give us his viewpoint of what's going on with the Green Bay Packers. All of that coming up this week on Locked On Packers. Something interesting happened yesterday at practice with the offensive line. And that was Rasheed Walker, 2022 seventh round pick, who a lot of people felt like was a top 100 talent on pure physical ability and upside, was the starting left tackle. And David Bakhtiari, day off, maybe a couple of days off. And Yosh Nijman practiced. Wasn't like he wasn't out there. They did a lot of mixing and matching. They did some with Yosh Nijman at left tackle and Zach Tom at left guard, Zach Tom at center and Yosh Nijman at right tackle. But this raises what I think are really important questions for the Packers about how they want to build this team and what they value right now. Because if it's true that Rasheed Walker is a starting caliber offensive tackle today, or they think he could be in a couple weeks or in a couple months, then they have 4 starting caliber offensive tackles. We know David Bakhtiari, all pro caliber player. Zach Tom made it very clear he is a starting caliber player. Yosh Nijman would start on half the teams in the league. And if the Packers aren't one of them, and Rasheed Walker could be one of them. By the way, I think if you're going to put those 2022 rookies in any alignment, you'd put Zach Tom at left tackle and Walker at right tackle. Body type wise, skill set wise, that just makes the most sense. But if you have 2 offensive tackles that are starting caliber and a swing guy, you have an extra. Now, could that open up the door to make Zach Tom a center? Maybe. Matt LaFleur left open that possibility when asked about it yesterday. And I don't think that's the best use of Zach Tom. I think he's too good at tackle, especially in pass protection, where that is the most valuable thing you can be, is a pass protecting offensive tackle. But if you have 4, I get it, injuries, you can never have too many quality offensive linemen. But this goes back to something I was saying in February, March, April. Why wouldn't a team give up a draft pick to go make a restricted free agent offer on Yosh Nijman? Was what I was saying. Now, obviously, they can't do that now. But watch preseason from over the weekend. Just maybe like watch some cut-ups, watch some clips, or watch it this weekend. There is so much bad offensive line play out there. And we had Brandon Thorne on last year before the season. Brandon Thorne to talk about Sean Ryan and Zach Tom and all these guys. Brandon Thorne is like the preeminent offensive line expert in media right now. There are a lot of former offensive linemen who are good too, but Brandon does a terrific job of breaking it down, writing about it, all those things. Obviously, there are other guys who know it as well or better than Brandon. Let's be fair to everyone here. And what he was saying was what the Packers do isn't normal, that they just pull guys and the infrastructure is such that they can develop them into these starting caliber players. There are teams in the division that don't have 2 starting caliber offensive tackles. There are contending teams in the NFC, like maybe the San Francisco 49ers, that don't have 2 starting caliber offensive tackles. They have 1 for sure. Trent Williams is a bad man. But there's plenty of teams out there, the Jets being one of them, the Bills potentially being one of them. We don't know what the situation is, what's going on in Cincinnati. The Bengals might be one of them. Could Miami be interested in an offensive tackle that has knowledge of the system? Why wouldn't a team give up a nice pick for Yosh Nijman if you're willing to go to war this year with David Bakhtiari? And look, I see the value in having David Bakhtiari there with Jordan Love. And if he plays well enough and you think, okay, in a year, it's worth giving him a contract, by all means. But this is where I start to wonder. This is where I start to wonder. Not that I'm advocating for it. I'm wondering, I'm thinking. If this is the developmental year, and Jeremy Fowler from ESPN reported, they cut way back on spending this year, but they're going to have a lot of money to spend next year. Expect that approach to change next year. If Jordan Love is a quality quarterback, they are going to go for it next year because they're going to have a lot of really good young players. It looks like, based on where we stand right now, Brian Gutekunst absolutely hit home runs the last 2 drafts. 2021, a little hit or miss. Josh Myers might be out of a job. Aaron Rodgers already out of the NFL, basically. Eric Stokes, maybe not a starter on this team. Not great for a first-round pick. If you're playing for 2024, really, you want to win games this year, but you're really trying to win games next year. Doesn't it make sense to trade David Bakhtiari now? And I'm not saying to the Jets because that was, Mike Greenberg's plea, his prayer on ESPN the other day. You're not going to do anything that makes your draft pick worse. Just not going to do that. Not, unless they're going to offer like 2 future first-round picks. But you could get theoretically premium draft capital. Now, the contract makes it potentially onerous. You'd likely have to rework the contract in order to make it so the Packers don't just eat $1 bazillion in dead money. But it does make me wonder. Now, if you're willing to do a contract extension and figure this out and rework everything and say, if this goes well, be a long-term part of our future, even longer-term part of our future, then I'd be looking at this going, someone come get Yosh Nijman. Put him on the table. Convince a team. LA. Either pick in LA, but mostly the Chargers. Come get this guy. He's better than the guy you're currently starting at right tackle, I promise. There are teams, especially in the AFC, who feel like they're ready to contend and they're an offensive lineman away. NFC is wide open. I have no problem trading Yosh Nijman to an NFC team because you're fine with what you have. Rasheed Walker becoming a starting caliber player is a potentially huge development for the Packers if it's real. And he played well in Cincinnati. He started to play really well at the end of last preseason as well. And so if he's stacking these practices and starting to show the physical tools, and by the way, he's not the only upside bet the Packers have made over the last few years. This Brenton Cox bet from Florida, we've talked about him on the show a number of times already. He was outstanding against the Bengals. Matt LaFleur singled him out. in postseason or in post-game comments and in his Sunday press conference. He played awesome, was constantly in the backfield. He might mess around and make this team. So if you're the Packers right now, you feel like your roster is in a really good position with a lot of these young players. And now would be the time to get something of value. Don't just like let him walk in a year and take the comp pick. Although he could get a massive deal and you get a future third and all those things, like that's great. But then that's offset by in a year, if that's when you're going to spend money, you're not getting that comp pick. So why not deal him now? And now maybe you could get more at the trade deadline. A team starts to get desperate. A team, that their season has not gone the way that they hoped, and it's because they've got injuries at offensive line, and they come calling. All of that could be something that happens. The Packers are in a very, very advantageous position with this offensive line. And if it were me, I'd be trying to find a trade for one of these guys, depending on what you see as your future outlook. The contract makes it difficult with David Bakhtiari, but he's a really good football player, one of the best offensive linemen of his generation. I see no reason to unless he just doesn't want to be in Green Bay. I see no reason to push him out the door. So that leaves Yash, who's a great story for Green Bay, a great development story, and I wish him nothing but the best. I'm not trying to get him out of town by any means, but I think it could benefit the Packers to maximize their window now, not to win, not to go win the Super Bowl, but maximize assets. And we'll see if they do it. All right, we're going to finish up here talking about the tight end position because we found out the Packers are going to be down a tight end for the entire season. So where do they go now? All of that coming up on Locked On Packers. Football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to win all season long. This is such a cool thing because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. So an NFC team, you bet the Eagles to win, you're going to get a bonus bet like, 12 times, 13 times? Every time they win. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl and you'll get bonus bets for every win. Bonus bets you can use on spreads, on player props, player plops, over-unders, and a lot more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. And thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. Every day, check out what we're doing, what we've got cooking over at The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. And check out Locked On Sports Today. All the biggest stories in sports in under 20 minutes. You can find it wherever you get podcasts. Tyler Davis, going to miss the season. Torn ACL. It is a bummer for a player that had been making strides, that they felt was ready to have a place in this offense. And I made no secret about not being the biggest Tyler Davis fan. I did not understand what they saw in him. He had become a player that they were going to use a fair amount as a blocker. And okay, I get it. I mean, I don't, but I get it. I get the theory anyway. Now you're down to 3. You've got 2 rookies and Austin Allen, who you only just signed in January. And is a young player himself. And we got to get him a new number. Can't be 49. Got to get him a new number. What do you do? And I do wonder if this had happened 10 days ago. If Mercedes Lewis isn't a Packer. Now, that does raise the question, like if you're just going to promote Austin Allen. By the way, I think that's fine. You've got Josiah DeGuara. I wonder if that makes it more likely that someone like Henry Pearson, the rookie fullback, makes the team. Because if you're going to use Josiah DeGuara as an H-back, but you need the tight end depth, he knows all the concepts. He knows all the stuff. at tight end. So he becomes a sort of backup tight end, an emergency tight end. You have the two rookies. Now the decks are clear. The decks are clear, Tucker Kraft, because Luke Musgrave was already going to be on those decks. He was already going to be there. Now it's Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. Tucker Kraft made some nice plays, especially in the run game against the Bengals. Had, by all reports, another nice practice on Sunday. So maybe starting to put something together here. I don't, especially when you're talking about two high pick guys, I don't see the value really in going out and signing a veteran. But one thing I was thinking, could you do a player for player trade? I talked about trading Yosh Nijman. Could you trade Yosh Nijman? Could you find an offensive line needy team and trade for a tight end who might be able to come in and actually give you reps? Now, I don't necessarily have anyone in mind. I've heard the name OJ Howard thrown around. I don't think that's fair value, by the way. Like, Yosh is not. I would much rather have Yosh Nijman than OJ Howard, but he is a guy that has been mentioned out there. But it was just something I was thinking about. Could you do a player for player trade? It was something that Ted Thompson did a handful of times in camp. Brian Gutekunst has made a couple of player for player trades. Josh Johnson. That's the quarterback. Josh Jackson was a player for player trade for a corner that they did not keep. It was two corners that neither team really wanted. Remember Demarius Randall traded for Deshaun Kaiser. I don't think it's crazy to me. It's not crazy. There are teams out there that could potentially use the help at offensive line that might have multiple tight ends, one of whom would be potentially interesting to the Packers. Now, I think that these player for player trades are few and far between, and finding that perfect blend of like, hey, he's a useful player and there's something there, but we don't know what, like that kind of thing. Like, I don't really know how you thread that needle, especially how do you get fair value in a situation like that. I'm racking my brain trying to figure out where this value might come. But Yosh Nijman has real value. And so could they find an opportunity like that? Could you convince, for example, the Raiders? They draft Michael Mayer. They have Austin Hooper. Austin Hooper's a nice player. Now, Austin Hooper probably doesn't fit the bill here because he's too established of a player would want to play. You kind of want someone who's going to play teams and has some upside maybe. But those guys, the other teams probably want to keep around. So it's a hard thing to look for. I don't think they're going to do anything. It was just something that I wanted to throw out there, an idea that, you have to at least explore. I think it's worth exploring. Can you get a third, and maybe Austin Allen is it, but could you get a third young, like not a rookie, but a year two guy maybe in exchange for a tackle for a team that felt like they were a tackle away from really being in the mix? I'm going to noodle on it a little bit more. I struggled to find someone. If you have an idea, send it to me. Send it to me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski, or at Locked On Packers. Follow me there. We'll be back tomorrow. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get podcasts. Subscribe to us on YouTube if you are watching it. Thank you so much for watching it on YouTube. And go find me on Subtext. Some people have had some issues finding me on Subtext. Look for Locked On Packers. Look for Locked On Packers on Subtext, and you will find me there, I promise. And anytime you want to hit me up, Subtext is now the place to do it, but you can also do it on Twitter or come live. Come hang out with us live on YouTube. We did it after the game. It was a monster hit. One of our biggest shows, one of our biggest live shows ever for a preseason game. You guys are sickos, and I love you so much. Thank you for staying locked on Packers.